Mr. Panza, Racing Secretary, how did you or the NYRA board come to the decision that the best thing for the Belmont Stakes would be putting it as the first race and a shorter distance, mile and an eighth?
Right, so when we got word that the Derby was going to be September the 5th, we started looking at different options, and at the time we looked and we ran numbers for the fall. It just didn't make sense in the fall, and we started looking at with all the different tracks canceled, there seemed to be an opening in June, and we decided, our racing committee decided as a group that June was the right spot to run the race. And then, you know, we looked at, okay, a mile and a half in June, and we just felt that there weren't enough opportunities for these horses to probably be ready to run a mile and a half yet, and it just made sense to drop the distance from 1 year only to a mile and an eighth. And so we look forward to June 20th, and it looks like we'll have a good race.
Mr. Lenny Hale, you've been a racing official over many, many years, and you've done just about everything in the racing business, from the starting gate up to the executive offices of NYRA. And probably one of your greatest talents, which is important for this interview, is that you've been a racing secretary, which means you've set up races and decided various aspects of how a race should be run and who should enter in the race. We have a very unique year, and this unique year is basically because they've changed the Belmont. They've changed it from a distance of what was classically 1.5 miles to 1 1/8 mile. And they've changed it also in the time of the year because of this pandemic, which is a 1-up. So it'll be the first race of the Triple Crown. It's never been the first race before. So I just want your general comments. What do you think about this change in tradition, which appears to be necessary?
Well, to start off with, I am a traditionalist, but, and here comes the but, the Belmont has been all over the map over the years, long before it became part of the Triple Crown. And it was run at a mile and an eighth at one time back in history. And I'm counting on this to be a glitch, this one-time thing. I haven't heard any of the tracks mention that they would keep this format later on or anything like that. They all seem to think they'd go back to the way it was. And that's what I'd like to see. The trouble is, everybody has an opinion, obviously. And, you know, it's tough to take change in this business, but we have to do it sometimes.
Let's start at the beginning. The Belmont Stakes itself was first run in 1867, Jerome Park Racetrack in the Bronx. And I think it's the oldest of the three stakes races comprising the Triple Crown. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay. Interestingly, a filly won that first race, and it was a 1 5/8. By Belmont tradition, which we're concentrating on the Belmont right now, in 1890 it moved to Morris Park Racetrack racecourse, which I believe was sort of the Bronx-Westchester border, with the new Belmont racetrack, the stands that we know, opening in 1905. And interestingly enough, 1911 and 1912, because of anti-gambling legislation, we didn't have a Belmont. So it's not that it's been raced uninterrupted. Only the Kentucky Derby's been raced uninterrupted. The Preakness has been interrupted a couple times too.
Well, and the Preakness ran in New York for a number of years, which a lot of people don't know. I think it was 7 or 8 years that they ran it in New York before it came back to Maryland.
It doesn't sound like you're opposed to this change of the Belmont as long as it's a one-time deal.
You hit the nail on the head. If it's a one-time thing, that's great.
I talked to Martin Panza, who is the current racing secretary for NYRA, and he said this is a 1-up year and it's the only time they're going to do it. Politics being what they are, there's a lot of things that are said, but in agreement with you, I think everyone traditionally wants to see it at the same distance at the same time of the year, if that is possible from now on.
Right. Well, I've known Martin for some time. We've been on the Graded Stakes committee together for years while he was in California. His situation is different than mine. Mr. Phipps pretty much ran the show back then, and now he's passed, and the New York Racing Association reverts to the state of New York. So things have changed, but I hope he's got that accurately.
And the other interesting thing is the Belmont originally was a 1 5/8, so it wasn't a 1.5 miles. It was a 1 5/8, and then the Derby and the Preakness were originally each a 1.5 mile races. I'm talking in the 1800s.
Right. Yeah, back then there were a lot of 2-mile races. 2 1/4 was the display, and all that got changed as racing changed and more sprinters were introduced. The breeding industry changed, and they followed the money, and the money was going to the shorter races. Sadly, I'm happy to know that I was part of the best years of racing up until now. And it'll continue, it just won't be in the same form that we like.
Those years are never to be repeated again, unfortunately, like a lot of the good things in life, the traditions that are continually being broken down. Just for the audience's sake, this order of the Derby, the Preakness, and the Belmont only began since 1931. I mean, it's a long time. It's 89 years, but
Okay.
but it wasn't always the order of the Derby, the Preakness, and the Belmont. It was, I think, the Kentucky Derby group deciding that they're going to set their date on the first Saturday in May, and then everyone followed suit with picking a date, and it's been like that.
Everybody set their stake schedule around the first Saturday in May.
Yeah.
For years.
And you know what? Having interviewed a number of people, and I have a few more that I'll be talking to, it almost appears like, and sadly to my extent as a New Yorker, that everyone is basically gearing for the Derby. They're all aiming for the Derby now. That seems to be so. I think you jokingly said, so this year's Belmont will be a prep race for the Derby.
One more race for an asterisk.
Yeah, I did already talk to Barclay Tagg, and he was very disappointed. And I could understand it. He said he's waited 20 years since Funnyside to win the 1.5-mile Belmont, and he thinks he had a good chance for doing it with the horse he has now. 'Tis the Law, the favorite. So he was disturbed when I said to him that my understanding is that they probably shortened the race because a lot of horses weren't prepping for the Belmont anymore, or let alone the Kentucky Derby. No one knew what was going to happen. And it's a lot of stress on these horses to put them through all that training. And I believe maybe no one wanted the horses to get hurt for their safety or the conditioning, and maybe to attract enough of the right horses. I don't have the answer, but Barclay was upset. I told him what I think most people would feel, that even if a horse has an asterisk after his name, it's a tremendous feat for him to do all this anyway on such short notice and under the circumstances. It's interesting. I was familiar with the original projections they had about how they were selecting horses, and they were doing it based on purse winnings. And I think they had room for, I'm guessing now, to be honest with you, I think they had room for like 8 horses that were going to be selected by purse winnings, and then they were going to have another 4 or more horses, maybe up to 8, based upon what this select committee would decide would be the horses to run. Unfortunately, in this particular year, we had some great horses entered. Bob Baffert, in fact, while he had his amazing streak of great luck due to his performance, with 2 horses winning the Triple Crown within a 3-4 year period, this year he lost to injury 2 of his greatest horses that were entered. So it's been a very interesting year to try and fill that race. I think there's going to be an increased spectatorship on national television because there's a few sports going on right now, and I think that in some ways this is going to draw attention. I understand the gambling dollars have increased because of this.
Well, it seems that way, and there's an old saying on the racetrack: a good horse can come from anywhere. So you don't have to eliminate the little guy, because just like Barclay Tagg jumped up with Funnyside. Now here years later, he's got another favorite for the Derby. So anything can happen. He's an old steeplechase rider and a good horseman himself. So keep your eyes open and don't be surprised.
So Billy, very unusual year. How did you guys survive the pandemic?
Good. We were in Florida. We had the majority of the horses in Florida at Payson Park, and we're sort of out in the country, and the place that we were at in Martin County was not very hard hit by the pandemic. So, we worked as usual, and then we were just forced to stay in Florida for another 6 weeks beyond what we usually do.
What was your reaction when you heard they're having the Belmont, but it's going to be the first race of the Triple Crown? It's going to be at a shorter distance, mile and a half.
Well, nothing was surprising in regard to the placement of these races. I mean, everything was total confusion, I guess, and nobody knew if they were going to run or when they were going to run. So the fact that they are going to run it, I guess, is a good thing. And the only thing that probably was a little bit of a surprise was that they shortened it to 9 furlongs. I thought if they shortened it up, I felt they would probably make it at least 10 furlongs. But, you know, I guess they felt like, you know, they didn't know when people were going to have prep races for the Belmont, so they felt 9 furlongs was probably the best distance, but it's hardly the classic distance.
Do you think there's going to be, well, there will be a need for an asterisk, whoever wins the Belmont this year, but do you think it decreases the value of it, or not really?
You know, it probably won't decrease the value of it in regard to the meaning of it as far as a stallion prospect goes, because a lot of people would probably rather have a stallion that wins at 9 furlongs than one that probably wins at 12 furlongs. So in that regard, it's probably a positive. In regard to saying it's at a classic distance is a negative.
Is this a potential Triple Crown type of horse, or is this the horse that you want to just pick each spot as you go?
Well, I mean, I guess if you're in the Triple Crown races, you're a Triple Crown horse, so you know what I mean. I guess if you know, if we run in the Belmont and run well, naturally we'd want to go on to the next one. But you know, we definitely like to run in the Derby.
It seems like almost everyone is gearing for the Derby. The Belmont has become the prep for the Derby.
Yeah, right, and that's the case this year.
Were your horse not to be in it and you weren't in it at all, who are you looking at that you think is the strongest contenders?
It looks like the horse that has a lot of talent is Barclay Tagg's horse, and he's coming off a real good race. He got a good trip in his last race and looked very impressive.
Well, as a final note, everyone in the world is waiting for you to get the 5,000 number. So, wouldn't it be amazing if it happened Belmont Day or Belmont Stakes?
Well,
but regardless,
we'll
can't predict.
We'll take it whenever it comes.
Okay.
I mean, if it could come in a 10,000 claim or the Belmont Stakes, I don't know. But whenever it arrives, it arrives. And the thing about it is, once you hit 5,000 and once that happens and you wake up the next morning, you got to start over. So it's, we're always looking for the next win and not looking back.
Who are the two that will be there?
Dr. Post and Farmington Road.
Now, are these two horses that you would have entered in this Triple Crown, the new Triple Crown series anyway, or you're just looking at the Belmont as starters and see where you go from there?
Well, Farmington Road probably would have started in the Belmont, if it were the traditional mile and a half, because he had a good foundation of races leading into it. Dr. Post, on the other hand, was a bit behind schedule, so he sort of benefited from the change in distance and the change in the calendar.
And how did you fare as far as this whole pandemic that's affected all of us? This is going to be a classic year no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of adjustments made for everyone. We've had to alter a lot of schedules and change routes with a lot of horses and people, and try to remain flexible. Fortunately, most of our people have stayed healthy, and that's the most important thing. But and basically, when you're training horses or taking care of horses, it's something that is essential to be done every day. And so, in a lot of ways, our daily routines have not changed a lot, with the exception of racing opportunities.
What was your initial reaction when, yes, we're having the Belmont, but it's going to be the first race and it's going to be at a shorter distance, a mile and an eighth?
Well, I mean, I think it was just considering the options, and once Churchill established when the Kentucky Derby was going to be, it sort of limited Belmont's options. They could have potentially held it sometime in October, but then the Preakness is going to be then. So really, without having a concrete schedule, I felt like that NYRA made the right decision, making the Belmont, shortening it up in distance and making it the first leg made sense once the other two tracks had picked out their dates.
If you weren't in the race with any horse, who would you next be looking at to be the horse to beat?
Well, I certainly am a big fan of 'tis the law. You know, he's a son of Constitution who I trained, and so we've been watching his development closely. He's been trained brilliantly by Barkley Tag, and you know, the horse has been very impressive, especially his one in the Florida Derby. So, you know, with horses in there, I'll still be keeping an eye out on him. Certainly feel like, you know, he's the horse that everyone has to beat.
This year, whoever wins the Belmont, there'll probably be an asterisk mark next to that horse because of the shorter distance. You think it's going to limit any of these horses as far as future potential breeding value or value in general?
Well, I mean, it's not the traditional Belmont, but in its own right, it's a very good race. It's a solid Grade 1, and I think anytime you have a 3-year-old that's capable of winning a Grade 1 at a mile and an eighth, be very attractive to the breeders, and you know, so I think it'll still carry a lot of prestige, and despite not being, you know, its traditional place and kind of historically, it's still a great race in its own right.
Thanks for your time. We wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
How did you survive the pandemic?
Well, we took it one day at a time. You know, it was trying to keep the horses cared for properly, trying to keep the employees cared for properly. You know, and the community, the horse community here was really great. They really made great efforts to protect the people and the horses. But we're all delighted to be back to racing now.
What do you think of this year's decision for the Belmont being the first race and being a mile and an eighth, a short distance race?
Well, I don't think it was by choice. Clearly, that's what, you know, had to take place for us. I'm glad that they did not postpone the Belmont any further than they did. It's typically around about June 6th, and this year it's going to be June 20th. So I have a horse running in the Belmont named Max Player, and I'm pleased that we have a race in front of us.
Is your decision to race Max Player in the Belmont part of a single race strategy, or is it part of a long-term plan to lead up to potentially another race or even a Triple Crown Series?
Well, we had planned to run in the Belmont all along. Max Player won the Withers at Aqueduct on February 1st, a Grade 3, 250,000 at a mile and an eighth. Our next spot was to be the Wood Memorial on April 4th, but of course at that point we were not racing horses. All racing had been shut down all over the country. So, but the Belmont was on our radar. We had planned on running in the Belmont. I did not realize it would be the first leg of the Triple Crown, but here we are. What
kind of horse do you have, and why do you think it's a good horse?
Well, he's won 2 Grade 1s already, so he's got to be some kind of good horse, I guess. He's done everything we've asked him to do. He does things easily. He seems like he'd be a good horse on the Triple Crown contention. We're going to try it.
Was that your intention to try Triple Crown even before this pandemic hit with a horse like this?
Oh, yeah.
What do you think the difference is now, and are you accepting of it? You have to be, but are you accepting of the fact that it's the first race at Belmont, which hasn't happened for many, many years, and it's also a short race, a mile and an eighth?
Well, I didn't like the fact that they shortened it up, and I don't know if they'll keep it a classic race or what's going to happen, you know, but as long as it's a Grade 1 and the money's up there, well, we'll go for it. But,
well, I just interviewed Marty Panza, and he said that they had to pick that date to fit it in, and he said once they picked that date, they decided there's a lot of horses wouldn't be ready for a distance race, so they decided for this year only. So hopefully, like you said, it'll be shorter.
Same date they've always had it, when you think about it.
Yeah.
We was ready for distance horses then. So,
you know.
I don't know.
Will this be particularly rewarding if...
Absolutely.
Well, not only that, because of your previous association with Saratoga Stables and missing the Triple Crown by the Belmont years ago.
Yeah, you know, try again. It's only taken me 20 years to find another one like this.
Wow. Well, we thank you so much for all your time, and wish you the best of luck.
Well, thank you very much.
What do you think of this year's, what's believed to be a necessary change or placement of the Belmont first? And the second part of that question is, what about the issue with it being only a mile and an eighth instead of the expected mile and a half?
Well, according to the circumstance, this is the best they could do. And then horses was not able to train hard or to run before the Derby was switched, the Preakness was switched. So he did the best. If he would have made the Belmont a mile and a half, he wouldn't have many horses then. They're looking for a big field. And unfortunately, some of the horses got hurt, and the field is getting smaller now. But
Most of the people that I know that are traditionalists that want to see everything stay the same were a little disappointed when they first heard about the new Belmont, we'll call it, but they realized, like you, that there wasn't many choices to make.
yeah, we did the best for what we have. It's like playing a poker hand. You play what you get. It's gonna be different. It's gonna be people will remember this day that they switch around. Belmont will be the first, Derby the second, Preakness the last, but it's still a Triple Crown race, still important, and still everybody wants to win it.
Since the Belmont started in the 1800s, this is the first time it's the lead-off race for the Triple Crown.
And not only that, it's more unusual not to see people on the track. I mean, not that I'm going to make any change of the race outcome, but it is people wait for this time of the year to go to these races.
You probably know better than anyone, having been on the track running in these kind of races. Do you as a jockey, or does the horse sense when they hear the crowd roaring to the degree they roar for these races, or does it not make a difference?
Well, the crowd probably affect the horses before the race in the paddock. It's too much noise or something like that. When they hit the track, they don't hear the noise. But I would have loved to ride when there was no crowd on him. This way nobody would have booed me.
I already spoke with Barclay Tagg, and he was personally disappointed not to get the mile-and-a-half Belmont. He felt his horse could go that distance, and he was fit and prepared for it, and I think he wants to set a record straight, having lost the Belmont with Funnyside 20 years earlier. So personally, I told him it'd be a great achievement to win it no matter what the distance, no matter what the circumstances, especially in this kind of an unusual year.
Well, you know, he's a great horseman. I rode for him, and I always been with my jockey riding for him. He's a great accomplished horseman, and his girl that helps him driving, she's a very good horse lady. I know he's ready for whatever distance he comes. It would be good to see this horse win for him and giving a step to the Hall of Fame. This guy has done a lot for what he got, and it's, you know, you need to recognize this kind of horseman that we have, that they have done a good job with no much horses to do it. You know?
He started his whole career, he told me, assisting in the barn with Frank Whiteley, so that's going back a long time. Most people watching the races today don't even know who Frank Whiteley was, but you look in the record books, he was a force to reckon with.
And Bagley rode jumpers too.
Yeah.
And he's always been a consistent trainer. He just don't carry that many, you know, expensive horses like other stables, but he does a good job with what he got. And he did a great job with Funnyside. And he's done a good job with these horses. So.
Let's say your horse wasn't in this race, and you've got the favorite horse with Manny Franco, but let's say your jockey wasn't in this race, your horse wasn't in this race. Who are you looking at beyond your horse that could be a good second or third, or that's going to give you a challenge?
To be honest to you, the race is pretty even, you know. I mean, he's probably going to be the favorite because he's very consistent. He's only got beat once, and I don't blame him on the track, I blame him on the trip. He had a bad trip that day and he could not make it, but the race is pretty even, and anything could happen, you know. You don't get paid until you go by the wire first. I don't know, I would have probably tried to ride anything in the race if I didn't ride him, just to be in the race. It's like buying a ticket to win the lottery. You got to buy it to win it, you know.
You know, it's interesting because this is the first time racing is going to be back Triple Crown on national TV. You'll probably have a larger audience sitting in their living rooms watching this race.
It is. It's been because most of the sport are not going on. Now they started opening little by little, so everybody likes sport and everybody loves horses. They're betting a lot of money, so you know they all watching, and it'll be interesting to watch him in TV. You know, I mean, just sit there at home and watch what's going on.
This latest entry, Tap It to Win, won significantly an allowance race, I believe, and just did it beautifully, and he's in there. What do you think about that horse? Mark Case trains him, and he won the Belmont with Sir Winston last year. Is he a real factor?
Well, Mark is a very capable trainer. Anytime he's in the race, you have to worry about because he's a good trainer. Horses run good, consistent for him. It's going to be a lot of these horses that are going to run good because the time off and because the circumstance. You know, most of them, they went and run one time, and now they've been off for a long time. So I won't be surprised anything that could happen. You know, I just hope my horse got a good trip, and I know we're sitting on the best horse in the race.
Hopefully, we wish you the best that your horse prevails. It would be great for New York racing. It'd be great for Barkley. I'm sure it'd be a step to the Hall of Fame. It'd be great to resurrect his loss with Funny Side, even though it's not a mile and a half. He has a horse ready to go no matter what the distance.
Well, he got the chance now, and then he will have the chance for the Derby a mile and a quarter if everything goes right. This horse winning will be nice for them, nice for the owners, and nice for Manny. He will open the door for Manny Franco and show the people that he could ride on these kind of races. And this horse probably is the big step for him to be on the top sooner or later. So we're hoping for that.
Well, we wish you best of luck and a safe trip.
Thank you very much. I need it.
So, David, you're literally an authority on racehorses, race times, and the way things line up, sort of like a stockbroker. You know the way it's supposed to be.
Right.
What happens often isn't the way it's supposed to be. Having said that, let me just go through your 3 top picks, first, second, third, if you had to, in very briefly, and why they're your top picks.
Right, well, I mean, right now, I would say Tiz the Law is going to be a strong favorite and a deserving one. He's a Grade 1 winner, 2-time Grade 1 winner, once over this track. He's sort of been on a regular race schedule that gets him to this time of year. The 1-turn mile and an 1/8, I think, will help him, even though his connections really were looking forward to the mile and a half. But the fact that he won the Champagne here last year at a 1-turn mile, and he's a better horse now than he was in October of last year, and he's training great, I think he's going to, he's going to take all the beating, and it's a short price, so it's not easy. You're looking to beat the favorite. If I was going to pick a couple of horses that had a shot to beat him, one of them is Dr. Post, trained by Todd Pletcher. Horse that was very highly thought of as a 2-year-old, actually one of his earlier starting 2-year-olds last year. He ran here and he ran 3rd on July 4th, and then he got injured subsequently and was off for a while. The delay in all these Triple Crown races probably helps him. He's come back with 2 nice races, 2 wins, one in Florida in which he had a good education. He basically was stuck between horses and still was able to win. Does he have enough experience to get the job done? I don't know. I think it's a horse that's going to get more, the talent is going to show as the racing goes on. You have another horse that's sort of starting to catch my eye by the name of Max Player. The horse has basically been here all winter, raced in the Withers on February 1st. One of those horses that is another one that the trainer, Linda Rice, said, I really would like to get more racing into him. He'll improve with racing. Well, he seems to be improving with his training because his last 2 works over the main track have been better than anything he's done all winter long. So the maturation that Linda Rice is looking for through racing seems to be coming out through training. He'll probably be a big price. Linda could be the first female trainer to win a Triple Crown race if she pulls it off. The horse hasn't run since February 1st. That's an issue. The 140-day layoff is not ideal, but he's training as good as you can see, as you would want one to train.
How about, is Mark Case's horse a sleeper?
He's interesting because he just comes off a very big race and in his last start at Belmont, very sharp performance. Can he replicate that in 16 days? I don't know. Those are what they call bounce candidates. I mean, you run a really good race, maybe your career best, and then the next time, because you're running back on such short rest, it'll be 16 days, you regress, or what they call bounce. So I would anticipate him to be a bounce candidate. Same with Soleil Volante, a horse that just ran in Florida. He'll be running back in like 10 days. He ran last Wednesday at Gulfstream Park, so he has to not only get here, so he's got a ship up here, which I think will be a van ride, and then try and replicate that race over a different type of racetrack. So those 2 horses I think will take a lot of money, but there's reasons to maybe bet against them because they're coming back on such short rest that they could regress and not give you that same effort that they just did.
Or the opposite is they could take a playbook from Woody Stevens, from Alan Jerkins, from I think it was Sir Gallant, that raced after 4 days off or something like that, and then another 10 days off. Now that was a long time ago when horses theoretically maybe had some more bone or were trained a little differently than they are today. But having said that, some trainers would say, why waste another week or two training when I can just go right from one to the next?
Sure. I mean, look, Sole Volante ran in that race with the idea of using it as a prep for the Belmont, and his running style is such that he wasn't running all out from the get-go. He's laid in the back of the pack, kind of just went along easily, and then ran for the last quarter of a mile. So that type of horse could possibly bounce back a little quicker than, say, Tap It to Win, who was there from the get-go and ran hard all the way. We'll see how it plays out. But I would, if you're trying to make money in this race, if you like the favorite like I do, I might look elsewhere for a little bit of value.
Considering that this is a shorter Belmont, the first race of the year, some people are saying the Belmont's now become a prep for the Derby. Everyone's more worried about hitting the Derby. Is that your view, or?
Yeah, it kind of is. I mean, look, it's the whole year is going to have an asterisk. When you talk about 2020, whether you're talking about horse racing, sports, anything. I mean, somebody's going to win the Academy Award in next year for this year, and it might be a movie nobody ever saw. So the whole year is an asterisk. It's going to be different. It's basically the Peter Pan Stakes with the Belmont label and a $1 million purse. But if you win it 5 or 6 years from now or down the road, and somebody asks you if you won the Belmont Stakes, you can say, yeah, I did. And that's all that's going to matter. You're not going to go and say, well, it was the one that they ran a mile and 1/8. So I understand why they did it this way. The circumstances of the world changed everything, and it happened to change this year's Triple Crown.
Great perspectives. Thank you very much.
Thank you.